New Mexico Territory, summer of 1889. The sun bled over the desert like an old wound, lighting the land in tones of brass and ash. Dust swirled in ribbons across the road, scraping against the bones of wagon wheels long abandoned. From far off came the groan of a windmill, turning slow, tired, steady, like time refusing to die. On that road walked a woman and a boy. Mara Lark, 27, a widow too young for her grief, and Noah, her 4-year-old son, barefoot and half asleep on her shoulder. She carried him as if the world might try to steal him back. The sound of her steps mixed with the creak of leather and the distant bark of a coyote. Somewhere beyond the heat shimmer stood a ranch house, pale against the horizon, and the shape of a man watching them, still as judgment. No one knew that Gideon March had once buried a promise under that same sun. The ranch appeared closer than it was, the way heat toys with hope. Boards peeled, fence posts leaned, yet the place held a stubborn dignity. A brass weather vane creaked north, though no breeze came. Mara stopped at the gate, her throat raw, lips white with dust. "We're here, Noah," she whispered. The boy didn't stir. His head lay heavy against her neck, curls damp with sweat. She lifted her eyes and saw the man on the porch. Gideon March stood without speaking. His sleeves were rolled, showing arms corded from years of work. A Colt rested low on his hip, more tool than threat. He didn't call out, didn't move, only watched. The silence between them was wide as the plain itself. "I'm not here for charity," Mara said finally. "Just need a place for him to rest." Gideon's gaze drifted to the child before returning to her. "Barn's got shade," he said. "Water's in the trough." She nodded once, walked past the fence, and felt his eyes follow. The air smelled of metal and rain that never came. Inside the barn, light fell through slats like broken coins. The hay was dry but soft. Mara laid Noah down, brushed straw from his hair, and sat beside him. The barn spoke in groans and sighs. Beyond its boards came the slow creak of the windmill, the pulse of the ranch's only heart. She thought of her husband's face, what little she remembered of it, and of Paul, the debt that chased her across 2 states. A man named Hartwell. His name stuck like grit between teeth. Night came without cool. Crickets sang their rough lullaby. Mara dozed upright, hand on Noah's back. Then a sound tore the dark, sharp, metallic, near the well. A single gunshot. The horses stamped and snorted. She grabbed Noah, pressed him to her chest. The barn door swung open. Gideon filled the frame, shotgun in one hand, lantern in the other. The light caught the hard lines of his jaw. "Stay down." He crossed the yard, boots grinding gravel, lamp swinging. Another silence, heavier now. Then the click of a pump handle. Water sputtered weakly from the pipe, thin, red-tinted. Gideon knelt, touched the ground, rubbed dust between his fingers. When he returned, his face carried something unreadable, like a man who'd seen this before. He set the lantern on a beam, leaned the gun nearby. Nothing missing, he said. But someone wanted me awake. Mara whispered. Who? Don't know. Maybe the same who keeps moving my fence posts. He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw how his eyes held a tiredness deeper than fear, like he'd been waiting for a fight that never truly ended. You and the boy can sleep here tonight, he added. Come morning, I'll check the lines. She nodded. Thank you. He hesitated, then said, Don't thank me yet. When he left, the lantern flame trembled, painting the rafters gold. Mara listened to his footsteps fade, then the heavy door close. The desert reclaimed its quiet, but the smell of gunpowder lingered. Noah stirred, murmured half-dream words. Mara smoothed his hair. It's all right, baby. Yet she wasn't sure. Through the crack of the barn wall, she could see Gideon's shadow move along the porch, rifle glinting in starlight. He stopped once to look toward the horizon where the windmill turned, slow and moaning. She thought of what he'd said, someone moving fence posts, and wondered what kind of man guarded empty land with such devotion. Her mind flickered back to a night months ago, a room full of smoke and cards, her husband whispering, Just one job, Mara, and we'll be free. The next morning he was dead, his debts alive. That was when she started walking west. Outside, thunder muttered somewhere beyond the hills. The air felt charged, expectant, as if the desert itself held its breath. Mara lay beside her son, eyes open to the thin line of moonlight slipping through the boards. She thought of the man on the porch, of his quiet and his watchfulness. Something about him carried both danger and mercy. She drifted between wake and sleep until the windmill moaned again, longer this time, lower. A sound like the land remembering something buried. Noah stirred. Mama, it's crying, he said. She pulled him close. Just the wind. But outside, Gideon March stood by the well, lantern lowered, staring into the water. The reflection of his face rippled and split apart. He dropped a handful of dirt in, watched it vanish. Somewhere below, the faint shimmer of silver caught the light before fading. He turned, scanning the empty plain. His hand brushed the badge-shaped button pinned inside his coat, an old cavalry insignia dulled with years. He exhaled through his teeth and whispered to no one, Not again. The night swallowed his words. The windmill turned once more, groaning like a secret too heavy to keep. Morning bled slow across the plains, gold filtering through the barn slats like sifted dust. The windmill groaned again, steady but tired, and the smell of hot iron drifted from somewhere near the forge. Mara woke to Noah's quiet breathing, his cheek pressed against her sleeve. She rose carefully, joints stiff from sleeping on the ground. Outside, the desert still shimmered with last night's heat. Gideon March was already at the well. His hat shadowed his eyes, shirt damp with sweat, though the sun had barely climbed. He pumped the handle once. Water sputtered, thin and gray. He muttered a curse under his breath. The man looked like he'd been up all night. And maybe he had. "Morning," Mara said. He nodded once, not looking at her. Pumps losing pressure. Someone tampered with it? He straightened, eyes narrowing toward the horizon. If they did, they were careful, too careful. From the distance came the soft clop of hooves. A horse emerged from the dust, paint gelding, mane braided with strips of red cloth. The rider dismounted before reaching the gate. Tall, copper-skinned, hair bound at the nape. "Chaitin 2 feathers," Gideon called. The man touched 2 fingers to his brow. "Your message reached me. You said the water sounded wrong." Chaitin crouched near the trough, placed his ear against the pipe. The world seemed to still around him. Then he stood, dusted his hands. "It's not the same voice," he said softly. "The earth hums different here." Mara frowned. "The earth hums?" He smiled faintly. "When water runs true, the ground breathes even. When men force it, it groans." Gideon kicked at the dirt, revealing a faint trace of white crust. "Salt," he said. Chaitin nodded. "Silver too, maybe. There's mining dust in your water, friend." A silence fell. Somewhere a hawk cried high above the mesa. Mara knelt beside Noah, handing him a tin cup of water. The boy sipped and grimaced. "Tastes like pennies." Gideon met her gaze. "He's right." They stood there, 3 souls under a sky too wide for comfort. Gideon's jaw worked, his mind already turning toward suspicion. "Could Hartwell's men have rerouted it?" he asked. "Could be," Chaitin said. "They've been scouting near Dry Mesa again, digging test shafts. The law won't touch them. They say it's just progress." At the word law, Gideon's expression hardened. "Progress doesn't shoot at night." Mara set the cup down. "Who is Hartwell?" "Victor Hartwell," Gideon said. "Owns the mining claim south of here. Thinks every drop of water belongs to him if it runs downhill." Noah tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, look." The boy pointed toward the porch where sunlight glinted off something small and metallic. He ran to pick it up, a silver star-shaped button, edges worn smooth. Gideon's face changed when he saw it. He stepped forward, took the button from Noah's hand, turning it between his fingers. "Old cavalry badge," Chaitin said quietly. "From the war." Gideon slipped it into his pocket. "Found its way home, I guess." Mara studied him. The man's shoulders tensed at the memory, though he said nothing more. Some ghosts didn't need names. They ate together later, near the porch. Mara fried cornmeal in a small pan she'd carried since Kansas. Gideon drank coffee black as tar. Noah chased a chicken that looked older than the barn itself. For a moment, the ranch almost felt alive again. Then, while sweeping the porch, Mara found something caught in a crack between boards. A folded piece of paper, edges yellowed, handwriting neat. She pulled it free and unfolded it. The words were faint but clear. "Receipt for surveyor's work. Willow Pass Project." Signed at the bottom, V. Hartwell. Her stomach turned cold. When Gideon came back from the well, she held the paper out. You should see this. He wiped his hands, read it once, twice. Where'd you get this? Inside my husband's coat, she said. The one I used for a blanket last night. His eyes lifted slowly to hers. Hartwell hired him. She nodded. That's his signature. What kind of work? I don't know. He told me it was a simple survey job. Said we'd finally have enough to buy land. Next day he didn't come back. Gideon stared past her to the horizon. If your husband mapped the aquifer, Hartwell's using his notes to steal the stream. Chayton spat into the dirt. Then this is bigger than trespass. The silence after that felt heavier than any gun. The only sound was the windmill groaning again, the slow grind of its metal heart. Noah ran toward them, holding the star button high. It shines, Pa. Gideon froze. The word hung in the air, small, accidental, powerful. Mara opened her mouth to correct him, then didn't. Gideon took the button, tucked it back into the boy's palm. Keep it safe, he said. Belonged to someone who fought for water once. Chayton mounted his horse. I'll ride south, see what Hartwell's men are doing near the ridge. If they've moved rock, I'll know. Gideon nodded. Watch your back. The rider turned, kicking up a swirl of dust as he vanished into the shimmer. Mara watched until the figure dissolved into heat. She looked toward Gideon. You really think my husband had a hand in this? He didn't answer, only tightened the strap of his holster. I think men die easier when they know too much. Noah tugged at her skirt. Mama, can we stay here? Mara knelt, brushed his hair. Just for now. Gideon stepped onto the porch, eyes scanning the far ridge where the wind bent the grass. He's coming, he said. She frowned. Who? He turned his head slightly. Hartwell. Men like him don't leave ghosts alone. Time 900s. From far down the road came the faint jingle of bridles, the glint of a black carriage through the haze. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of oil and iron. The desert seemed to hold its breath. The noon heat pressed like a hand over the plains. Air shimmered above the dry grass, and even the wind seemed too tired to move. Inside the ranch house, dust motes drifted through the open door as Mara scrubbed the floorboards with a rag. The boards smelled of soap, iron, and years of silence. Gideon March stood by the table, rolling up a worn map of his property. His movements were precise, deliberate, the kind of patience learned from war or loss. Mara watched him from the corner of her eye, still uncertain how to place him. Neither cruel nor kind, only resolute. You plan to keep us here long? She asked finally. He tied the map with a string. You can stay as long as you pull your weight. I can cook, mend, clean, but I don't want pity. Wasn't offering any. He poured coffee, motioned toward the cup beside her. Drink. You look like you've walked through hell. She almost smiled. Maybe I have. Outside, Noah's laughter rose and fell like birdsong. The sound startled Gideon. He hadn't heard laughter around the house in years. He stared out the window where the saw chased a grasshopper near the fence. His gaze softened, but only for a moment. Mara followed it. He's been quiet most of the trip. You gave him back his voice." Gideon said nothing, only adjusted the brim of his hat. Silence stretched between them, full but not hostile. After a while he said, "You need a home. I need an heir." The words fell hard, flat. Mara froze, unsure she'd heard right. "You need a what?" "An heir," he repeated. "Someone to walk this land when I'm gone. The soil deserves feet younger than mine." She looked at him, measuring the weight behind his calm. "And you think that boy should be it?" He nodded once. He already knows how to listen to the wind. That's more than most men. Her jaw tightened. "You're talking like this is a trade." "It is," he said simply. "A fair one. Time 700 mums. You think I'd marry you for land? I think you'd marry me for survival." The words cut sharp. She rose, wiping her hands on her skirt. "You don't know me, Mr. March." "I don't need to," he said. "I know what this country does to widows." The room fell silent except for the slow tick of the wall clock. Then a faint rattle came from outside. The windmill shifting again, slower now. The sound scraped across the fields like a warning. Gideon walked to the window, eyes narrowing. Pumps losing more pressure. Someone's been working near the ridge. Mara stepped beside him. "Hartwell?" "Maybe. Maybe not. But he's got men with shovels and lawyers both." A shadow passed across his face. The kind that comes from old wars, not new ones. He reached for his hat. "I'll ride out there at first light. See what's left of my boundary." She hesitated, then asked quietly, "And if you don't come back?" He looked at her then, really looked. "Then this place will be yours, until someone stronger takes it." He turned to leave. At the door, he paused. "There's bread in the pantry. Give the boy some milk. It's goat, not cow." She wanted to speak, but didn't. When he was gone, the house felt emptier than before, the air thick with things unsaid. Later, near dusk, Mara took Noah to the porch. The light turned copper. She poured water into a tin bowl, washed the boy's face, and felt the ache of the road still clinging to her bones. He played with a splinter of wood, tracing a shape she realized was a horse. "You like it here?" she asked. He nodded. "The man's not mean." "No," she said softly. "He's just forgotten how to be kind." Through the window she saw Gideon's shadow move inside the barn, hammering nails, fixing a latch. Each strike echoed across the yard like a heartbeat. When darkness fell, she noticed something by the door. A bowl of warm water and half a loaf of bread. He must have, left it quietly. No words, no note, just the act. She carried it inside, tore the bread for Noah, saved a piece for morning. Before sleep, she stepped to the barn's edge. Gideon sat near the forge, oiling the barrel of his rifle. The firelight painted his face in copper and smoke. He looked up once. Their eyes met. No greeting, no farewell, just understanding. "Mr. March," she said, "if Hartwell comes, what will you do?" He wiped the rifle clean. What I have to. The wind stirred between them, cool and dry, whispering through the mesquite. In the distance, coyotes called, lonely as lost prayers. Later that night, the windmill stopped turning. A silence fell so deep she could hear her own heartbeat. Gideon stepped outside, staring toward the ridge where moonlight caught the faint gleam of metal. Too bright for rock, too straight for nature. Someone had planted stakes there. Too many. Too deliberate. He muttered, "He's already begun." From the barn, Mara watched through a crack, clutching her son close. She didn't know who Hartwell was yet, but the fear in Gideon's stillness told her enough. When he finally came inside, he said only one thing: "Someone's killing the land." And in the quiet that followed, the desert wind carried the echo of something older than greed, justice waking in its sleep. The next morning dawned gray, wind carrying a faint chill from the north. Dust clung to the light, softening the horizon until sky and land looked the same. Mara stood on the porch, braiding her hair, while Gideon hitched the wagon. Noah sat in the back, chewing on a strip of dried apple, humming a tune he didn't know the words to. They rode toward Sable Creek, 2 hours of rutted road and silence. The town rose out of the plain like a mistake someone forgot to erase. Crooked roofs, a single church steeple, and the tin sign of the Copper Spur Saloon catching the sun. Horses snorted at the hitching posts. Men leaned in doorways, watching. Women swept dust only for it to come back. Gideon helped Mara down. "Get what you need. Don't linger." She adjusted her shawl. "You think folks will bite? They'll stare first." They walked to Maeve Elkin's store, the only place in town that smelled of cinnamon instead of smoke. Maeve herself stood behind the counter, apron dusted with flour, hair tied with a red ribbon faded by years. "Well, I'll be," she said. "Gideon March inside 4 walls that ain't his own. Miracles do happen." Gideon managed half a smile. "Need flour, salt, lamp oil." Maeve's eyes slid to Mara. "And who's this flower in the dust?" "Mara Lark," Mara said. "My boy Noah." Maeve leaned closer. "You've walked far. Too far." Behind them, 2 ranch hands whispered, "That her? The widow with the child?" March must be desperate or blind. Mara pretended not to hear, but her shoulders stiffened. Gideon turned, gaze like steel. The men suddenly found interest in the price of nails. Maeve slapped the counter lightly. "Ignore 'em. Town runs on talk and cheap whiskey. Both sour quick." They finished their purchase, but before leaving, a shadow filled the doorway. Victor Hartwell stepped inside. His coat was clean, boots polished, smile sharp. "March," he said. "Didn't expect to find you playing house." Gideon didn't move. "You're trespassing." "In a public store?" Hartwell chuckled. "I'm a businessman, Gideon. Always public." He glanced at Mara, eyes lingering a beat too long. "You must be the lady living on his land. Comfortable arrangement?" She met his stare. "I sleep fine." Hartwell smirked. "For now." Gideon set the flour sack down slowly. Say your piece. I came to make you an offer, Hartwell said. The mining company's expanding. We'll need your water rights. I'll pay fair. You think money can buy the sky too? Only the part that rains on my claim. The store went still. Maeve's hand tightened on the counter. Gideon's voice dropped. This land's not for sale. Hartwell shrugged, turning to leave. Every man sells eventually. Depends how thirsty he gets. He paused at the door, tipping his hat to Mara. Pleasure, ma'am. When he was gone, the air felt lighter, but dirtier somehow. Maeve exhaled. That man's got a smile like a knife. Mara picked up Noah. He looked at me like he knew me. Gideon's expression darkened. Maybe he did. Maybe he knew your husband. On their way out, a drunk at the saloon porch called after them. Hey, March! You raising another man's seed now? Laughter followed like flies. Gideon stopped, turned slow. The laughter died. You got something worth saying, he told the man. Say it like you're ready to lose teeth. No one spoke. He climbed into the wagon, jaw tight. Mara said nothing as they left town. The ride home was long. Wind pushed against them, hot and relentless. Halfway across the flats, Noah fell asleep. Mara finally broke the silence. He won't stop, will he? Rate medium. No, Gideon said. Men like Hartwell don't quit until someone buries them. The words hung between them, grim and honest. When they reached the ranch, the sky was the color of burnt copper. Gideon unharnessed the horse, brushed its neck. He's moving fast, he murmured. If he's here, his men are near. Mara lit the lamp inside the house. You've fought men like him before? I've fought worse, but they had uniforms then. He stepped onto the porch, looking toward the distant ridge. The windmill turned unevenly, creaking like an old hinge. A coyote howled somewhere close, sharp and hungry. Later, when Mara put Noah to bed, she found a small brass coin on the windowsill, the kind gamblers used at saloons. Scratched into it were the letters VH. She showed it to Gideon. He's been close, he said. Closer than I like. That night, he patrolled the yard with his rifle. Mara watched from the doorway, moonlight silvering his figure. There was something both sad and fierce about him, like a man guarding ghosts. When she finally lay down beside Noah, sleep came thin. In her dreams, she saw a map, lines of blue ink turning red, spreading like veins. Her husband's voice whispered, "It was supposed to make us rich." She woke to thunder rumbling across the valley. Gideon stood at the window, watching lightning flicker over the ridge. He's digging, Gideon said quietly, and he's not even hiding it anymore. Outside, the wind rose, carrying the scent of rain mixed with smoke. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a hammer struck metal, steady, deliberate, echoing through the night like a promise of war. The storm passed overnight, leaving the land raw and bright. Morning light spilled across the valley, sharp enough to cut. The air smelled of wet dust and sage. From the porch, Gideon watched mist rise off the fields, his hand resting on the rifle propped beside him. He hadn't slept. Somewhere out there, men were changing the shape of his world. Chaitin Two Feathers arrived near sunrise, his horse slick with sweat. He dismounted without a word, walked to the fence and drove a boot into the soil. A wooden stake wobbled loose, fresh cut, bark still damp. "They moved the line again," Chaitin said. "North this time." Gideon picked up the stake, ran a thumb along the edge. Hartwell's stealing land one night at a time. Mara joined them, Noah clutching her skirt. "Why move the fence? What's he gain?" "Water," Gideon said. "A few yards here, a few there, and the creek runs straight into his claim." Chaitin pointed toward the ridge. "There's smoke from campfires. Looks like they're digging day and night." Gideon's jaw set hard. He's not even pretending anymore. Mara glanced at the horizon, where the land shimmered silver gray. "You can't fight a company." He looked at her steady. "I can fight men who hide behind one." Inside the barn, Noah played with the carved horse Gideon had given him. The toy had a new nick on its flank, a scar cut from rough handling. Mara knelt beside him, smoothing his hair. "Be gentle, baby. Things break easy when you stop caring." While she spoke, Gideon rummaged through old army crates, pulling out yellowed maps and rusted surveying tools. Chaitin leaned over his shoulder. "You kept your charts from the war?" "Every inch of this valley was drawn once. I'll prove what's mine." They rode along the property line that afternoon. The wind had shifted south, carrying heat and the faint ring of hammers from Hartwell's camp. Gideon dismounted at a spot near the dry creek bed. The earth there was torn, boot prints deep. "See this?" he said. 4 horses, 2 wagons. They've been hauling on. Chaitin knelt, touched a scrap of metal half buried in the dirt. "Ore, all right. Not just water he's after. He's found silver." Gideon's eyes narrowed. "He'll claim the well's contaminated, then buy me out cheap." A hawk circled overhead, shrieking once before diving. The windmill back at the ranch creaked faintly, echoing the bird's cry. As they turned home, the sky dimmed. Mara kept glancing behind her, uneasy. "Feels like someone's following." "That's because someone is," Gideon said. Near the edge of the pasture, they found a scrap of fabric tangled on the fence wire. Dark, fine cloth, not ranch hand material. "Hartwell's men," Chaitin muttered. When they reached the barn, Mara took Noah inside. Gideon stayed out, scanning the ridge. His hand brushed the badge-shaped button in his pocket. "If he's drawing lines," he said under his breath, "then so am I." Night fell hard and dry. The lantern light threw long shadows across the yard. Gideon sat cleaning his rifle, the metallic clicks rhythmic, patient. Mara watched from the doorway, uneasy. "You can't keep watch forever," she said. "I can try." She stepped closer. "You said once the law might help." "The law's drinking with Hartwell right now." "Then what will you do?" He looked up. "What I always do, stand the line." Later, while tucking Noah in, Mara found something half-burned beneath a loose board in the barn. A map fragment, edges singed. Lines marked the creek, small crosses near the ridge, and a signature at the bottom. V. Hartwell. Her heart stopped. When Gideon saw it, his mouth tightened. Army survey paper. He's using military charts. Someone gave him access. Who? He didn't answer, but his eyes darkened. There were only a few officers stationed here who had those files. One of them wore a badge just like this. He held up the silver button between his tromcone fingers, its edges dull in the lamplight. Mara whispered, "You think he was one of yours?" "I think he learned from me." A horse neighed sharply outside. Gideon stepped to the door, rifle ready. Nothing moved but the wind and the faint flicker of lightning far off. He stayed there long after she went to bed. Close to midnight, a low thud shook the ground. Then another. He ran toward the sound, boots kicking gravel. Near the fence, a shadow ducked low, someone planting something in the dirt. "Stop right there!" he shouted. The figure bolted. A glint of metal flashed in his hand, a fuse cord. Gideon fired, missed by inches. The man leapt the fence and vanished into the dark. Smoke rose from the hole he'd left. Gideon knelt, heart pounding. It wasn't just wire. It was a small dynamite charge. The fuse half burned but snuffed by sand. "They're not moving boundaries anymore," he muttered. "They're ready to blow them." He carried the half-buried fuse back to the porch, the smell of sulfur thick in the air. From the barn, Mara appeared with Noah in her arms, eyes wide. "What happened?" Gideon held up the fuse. "Warning shot." Her voice trembled. "For us?" "For anyone who doesn't sell fast enough." Thunder rolled again from the mountains, distant but nearer than before. The windmill creaked once and stilled, as if even the air refused to move. Gideon looked to the horizon where faint lights flickered. Hartwell's campfires, steady and sure. "He's drawing his map in fire now," he said quietly. "Tomorrow, I'll draw mine." By dawn, the air was already heavy, thick with heat and the smell of dry grass. A hawk circled over the ridge, its cry slicing the stillness. Gideon saddled his horse in silence while Mara packed a small satchel of bread and jerky. Noah clutched the wooden horse, sleepy-eyed, watching his mother tie the bag shut. Chayton arrived as the sun broke over the hills. "Smoke near Box Canyon," he said. "Too much for campfires. They're using powder." Gideon mounted up. "Then we end this before the valley ends us." Mara stepped forward. "You can't take them alone." "I won't," he said, looking at Chayton. "But I won't wait for permission either." She took Noah's hand. "Then let me ride with you. I've run from worse men." Gideon hesitated, then nodded once. "Stay behind us. Keep him close." They set off through the flats, wind whipping grit across their faces. The land rose toward Box Canyon, a narrow cut between cliffs the color of rust. The closer they came, the stronger the smell of smoke and oil. When they reached the rim, they saw it. A line of men digging trenches, laying pipe toward the creek bed. Crates of powder stacked nearby. Hartwell's banner flapped lazily from a wagon. "Hell," Gideon whispered. He's draining the spring at the source. Chayton shaded his eyes. They'll blow the rock dam by noon. Mara pointed. Look, there. A smaller figure crouched by the fuse line, checking the powder charge. Harlan Pike. His coat gleamed with brass buttons, his hat low, face sharp, too sure of himself. Gideon's jaw tightened. If he lights that fuse, Sable Creek runs dry by sunset. Chayton dismounted. I'll circle left, draw their eyes. You go for the fuse. Mara gripped Gideon's arm. Be careful. He gave a brief nod. Always am. She almost smiled. That's not true. Chayton slipped into the rocks, moving like shadow. A moment later, a rifle cracked, his signal. Shouts echoed below as miners scrambled for cover. Gideon spurred his horse downhill, the canyon walls ringing with hooves. Dust exploded around him. He reached the crates, swung down, yanked the fuse line loose. Harlan saw him, drew his pistol. March! Step away, Gideon barked. Too late. Harlan fired. The bullet grazed Gideon's shoulder. He ducked behind a boulder, blood soaking his sleeve. Mara, clutching Noah, ran toward a dry gulch for cover. She turned just in time to see Harlan grab a match from his vest. Stop! She screamed. He grinned, struck the match on his boot, flame blooming in the wind. Then the ground erupted with gunfire. Chayton on the ridge. The match fell, burning out in the dust. Drop it! Gideon shouted. Harlan spun to fire back. Another shot cracked from above. Clean, perfect. The bullet hit Harlan's arm, spinning him sideways. The match fell into the crate's shadow, smoke curling upward. No! Gideon lunged forward, slammed his boot on the fuse. Too late. The spark leapt, racing toward the canyon wall. He threw himself backward, grabbing Mara and Noah as the explosion tore the ground open. The shockwave rolled through the canyon like thunder given shape. Dust swallowed the sky. When the echo faded, Gideon blinked through smoke. A section of the ridge had collapsed, sealing the dig site. Water burst from a split pipe, streaming across the dirt, turning it to mud. Chayton stumbled down the slope, coughing. You alive? Mostly, Gideon said. He helped Mara to her feet, brushing dirt from her hair. Noah clung to her leg, eyes wide but unhurt. Harlan lay half-buried near the crater, groaning. Gideon stood over him. You light one more fuse on my land, and I'll make sure you never see daylight again. Harlan spat blood. You think you've won? Hartwell's got papers. He owns the ground under your boots. Gideon leaned close. He can have the ground. I'll keep the sky. They left him there, tied to a wagon wheel. By the time they reached the ridge, the sun was dropping, painting everything in fire. Mara turned back once. The collapsed canyon glowed faintly from the setting light, water seeping from cracks like veins of silver. What now? She asked. Now we take proof to the law, Gideon said. They can't ignore a crater. Chayton shook his head. Don't trust the deputy. She works too close to Hartwell. Ruth Calder? Gideon frowned. She took oath same as any. Chayton's voice was low. Some oaths get bought cheap. They reached the ranch at nightfall, all three exhausted. Mara laid Noah to bed, then washed Gideon's wound, her hands gentle but steady. "You could have died," she said. "I didn't. You can't fight a company with one rifle." He met her gaze. "No, but I can start a fire they can't put out." Outside, a lantern swung from a post. Hoofbeats approached, the measured rhythm of authority. Ruth Calder rode into the yard, dust haloing her badge. "Evening," she said, dismounting. "Heard there was trouble in Box Canyon." Gideon stepped forward. "We stopped your trouble from blowing half the valley." She looked past him at the smoke rising faintly to the south. "And you trespassed on company land to do it." Mara's stomach knotted. "That land's his." Ruth ignored her, pulling a folded paper from her coat. "By order of the county marshal, I'm seizing any explosives and materials found on this property. Investigation pending." "You working for Hartwell now?" Gideon asked. She met his eyes, unreadable. "I'm working for the law." Chayton murmured, "Same thing these days." Ruth turned away. "Careful, Two Feathers. I still carry a badge." As she left, the sound of her horse faded into the dark. The wind rose, again, dry and restless. Gideon looked toward the canyon, the faint red glow still lingering there. "They'll come back stronger," he said. Mara touched his arm. "Then so will we." He looked at her hand, then at the horizon. The line between night and dawn had never felt thinner. The morning after Box Canyon carried no peace. The wind had changed, dragging the smell of burnt powder across the ranch. Gideon stood by the corral, rolling his injured shoulder, watching the dust settle on his land like ash. Mara brought him coffee, still steaming in a tin cup. He took it with a nod, but didn't drink. "She took everything," Mara said quietly. "The crates, the fuse, even the broken rifle." "She took the truth and called it evidence," Gideon answered. "That's the law now." Noah chased a chicken across the yard, laughing, unaware of the crack in the grown-up's world. The sound made Gideon glance up, then back to his land. "He laughs easy," he said. "Children don't know what to be afraid of yet." Chayton rode in mid-morning, dust on his hat. "Ruth Calder rode south right after dawn," he said. "Straight to Hartwell's camp. Didn't bother hiding it." Mara's jaw tightened. "Then she's bought." Gideon exhaled. "Maybe. Or maybe she's playing both sides." Chayton spat into the dirt. "The ground doesn't care who pays who. It just dies slower." They went inside. The house smelled of wood smoke and soap, faint and lonely. Maps and notes were spread across the table. Gideon traced the ridgelines with a calloused finger. "If we lose the water, the land cracks within weeks." Mara touched his wrist. "Then we don't lose it." He studied her, realizing how her voice had changed. Less fear, more resolve. "You sound sure." "I'm tired of running," she said. Before he could answer, the sound of wagon wheels broke the quiet. A cloud of dust rolled up the road. Maeve Elkins sat high on the seat, a burlap sack at her feet. She waved as she pulled up. "Brought news and flour," she said, climbing down. "Bad news comes cheaper than bread these days." Inside, she opened her sack and pulled out folded papers, county bulletins, half-torn notices. "Hartwell's petitioning to annex March property," she said. "Claims you're endangering minors with reckless conduct." Gideon gave a dry laugh. "He blows half a canyon and blames me." Maeve's eyes softened. "Law's a knife, Gideon. Depends who holds the handle." She glanced at Mara. "Heard talk in town. People say you're living here as his wife." Mara flushed. "Talk's cheap." Maeve smiled gently. "So's pride when it's hungry." She leaned close, whispered, "If you mean to stay, make it count. Don't just survive. Own it." After Maeve left, Gideon sat alone at the table, staring at the papers. The wind rattled the shutters like bones. That night, he packed a small bag, slipping the old cavalry button into his pocket. Mara found him saddling the horse. "Where are you going?" "Santa Vega, county office. I'll file the old deeds before Hartwell buys them out from under me." She stepped closer. "You can't ride there alone." "I've done worse alone." He finished tightening the cinch. "Keep the boy close. If I'm not back in 2 days—" "Don't," she interrupted. "You'll come back." He looked at her, a flicker of warmth crossing his face. "If I don't, this place stays yours." "Don't talk like that," she said. He hesitated, then reached into his coat, pulling out a small carving. A horse made of mesquite wood, its legs rough but sturdy. "For him," he said. "Tell him it runs faster than fear." She took it, fingers trembling. "You carved this?" "Every man needs something to keep his hands steady." She nodded. "Then come back and teach him how." He left before dawn. The sky turned pale pink as hooves faded down the road. Mara stood on the porch long after, clutching the toy horse. By midday, the ranch lay quiet. She hung laundry behind the barn while Noah splashed water at the trough. Then she heard the clatter of hooves, fast, urgent. Chayton rode in hard, his horse lathered with sweat. "Trouble?" she asked. He dismounted. "Hartwell's men are heading this way. They've got papers signed by Ruth. Search warrant, they say." Mara's heart lurched. "For what?" "For whatever proof Gideon took with him." They hid the remaining maps beneath the floorboard near the hearth. By the time the riders arrived, dust clouding the air, Chayton had melted into the hills. Ruth Calder led the group, her badge dull in the sun. "By authority of the county," she said, "this property's under investigation." Mara stood tall. "You already took your evidence." Ruth met her eyes. "Then you've got nothing to hide, do you?" Men spread out through the barn, overturning barrels, checking sacks. One kicked over a bucket of water. Noah started to cry. Mara knelt beside him, whispering calm. Ruth's gaze flicked to the carved horse in Noah's hand. "March made that?" "Yes," Mara said. Ruth nodded once, almost softly. "He's a good man. Shame good men never stay that way long around here." Then she turned and rode off, her men following, leaving churned dust and broken silence. Mara picked up the bucket, righted it, her hands shaking. She looked toward the horizon where Gideon had gone. Come back, she whispered. We still need you. From the hilltop, a hawk cried. 3 sharp notes, Chaitin's signal. Mara shaded her eyes and saw him far off, raising one hand. A sign. Gideon reached Santa Vega, still alive. Relief washed through her, but it didn't last. Behind her, the windmill groaned again, its blades jerking once, then stopping altogether. The well had gone silent. The trail to Santa Vega cut through the mountains like a scar. Rock dust clung to Gideon's coat, and the sun pressed hard against his back. Chaitin rode beside him, scanning the ridgelines through narrowed eyes. Behind them, Mara guided the wagon, hands tight on the reins. Noah slept under a canvas blanket, the wooden horse tucked against his chest. They'd left before dawn, chasing both hope and danger. The path twisted upward, hemmed in by cliffs that hummed with heat. You think the marshal will hear you out? Mara asked. Gideon adjusted his hat. He'll have to. I've got papers Hartwell can't rewrite. Chaitin grunted. He owns the judge's poker nights. That counts for more than truth out here. I've played worse odds, Gideon said. As the road narrowed, the air thickened with the smell of smoke. Chaitin halted, raising a hand. Something ahead. They rounded a bend and froze. A tree lay across the path, fresh cut, sap still bleeding. Gideon dismounted, examined the trunk. Set up to stop a wagon. A sound broke the stillness, the faint click of a rifle hammer. Down! Gideon barked. The first bullet hit the wagon wheel, splintering it. Mara grabbed Noah, diving behind the seat. Chaitin rolled off his horse, returning fire from the rocks. Echoes thundered through the canyon. Harlan Pike's voice rang out from above. Turn back, March! Ain't worth dying over dry dirt. Then stop bleeding it, Gideon shouted, firing toward the ridge. A shot grazed his hat brim. Dust stung his eyes. Mara pulled the hobbled horse loose from the wagon traces. We can't stay pinned! Chaitin fired again, dropping one of the riders trying to flank them. Move! He yelled. They bolted for the creek bed below the road, sliding down shale and sand. Bullets sparked off stone behind them. Noah clung to Mara's neck, small hands trembling. At the bottom, they crouched behind boulders. Gideon reloaded, blood from his shoulder wound seeping again. We can't outrun them uphill. Mara glanced at the water trickling nearby. Then we go under. Before he could stop her, she grabbed Noah and splashed into the shallow stream, following its bend toward a dry culvert that tunneled under the road. Chaitin covered them, firing short bursts. Gideon followed last, bullets striking sparks at his heels. They crawled through the tunnel, darkness thick as pitch. When they emerged on the far side, their clothes were soaked, hearts hammering. The shooting had stopped. Only the wind remained. They'll circle, Gideon said. We've got minutes. Chaitin nodded, checking his rifle. Enough time to make them regret it. From the ridge above, a blast echoed, too deep to be gunfire. The wagon exploded, shards of wood raining down. Mara shielded Noah, eyes wide. Damn it, Gideon hissed. They brought powder. Smoke rolled across the canyon, black and oily. Through it rode Harlan, face streaked with soot, revolver in hand. "End of the trail, March." "Not yet," Gideon said. He fired once, hitting Harlan's leg. The man staggered but stayed upright, firing back. The bullet tore Gideon's sleeve. Chayton took aim from higher ground, his shot knocking the pistol clean from Harlan's hand. The mercenary cursed, clutching his bleeding arm. "You'll die, broke, March." Gideon advanced, voice steady. "Better than rich and rotted." Harlan stumbled backward, then spurred his horse away, vanishing into smoke. The echo of hooves faded down the valley. Mara exhaled shakily. "You think he's running to Hartwell?" "He's running to save his skin," Gideon said. "Hartwell'll finish the job himself." They regrouped near what remained of the wagon. The canvas was torn, supplies scattered, but one chest, water-stained, half-crushed, still held the folded deeds and a soaked packet of papers. Gideon pried it open. Ink ran like bruises across the page, but a few words were still legible. Hartwell Mining Company. Underground Water Diversion Project. Mara traced the lines with her finger. "This proves he's stealing the stream." "If it doesn't reaches the judge," Gideon said, "it'll ruin him." Chayton looked down the road. "If we reach the judge alive." They started again at dusk, leading their horses on foot. The path wound lower now, through mesquite and coyote brush. The air smelled of sulfur and dust. Gideon's limp grew worse, but he said nothing. Mara offered her arm once. He refused with a small shake of his head. Half a mile later, they found blood on the trail, drops leading toward a fallen rider. The man wore a mask and lay half-conscious. Chayton rolled him over. One of Harlan's. Something slipped from the man's coat. A sealed envelope, the wax stamped with the county insignia. Gideon tore it open. Inside were official orders bearing Ruth Calder's signature. Authorization for temporary seizure of all property and water resources belonging to Gideon March. Mara's voice was low. "She's working for him after all." Chayton looked grim. "Or she's next on his list." The masked man stirred. Gideon crouched beside him. "Who gave you this?" The man coughed. "Hartwell. Said she'd sign or hang." His eyes rolled back. Dead. Silence settled over them, heavy and final. The canyon wind moaned like something mourning its own name. Gideon folded the papers, tucking them into his coat. "We ride through the night. No more stopping." Mara met his gaze. "You're bleeding." "So's the land," he said. "We'll patch both when this is done." As they mounted up, thunder rumbled again in the east. Lightning flashed, painting the cliffs white. The rain began in thin, angry drops. Mara turned in the saddle to look at him. "If the law's against us, what's left?" Gideon pulled the brim of his hat low. "The truth," he said, "and a rifle." They rode on through the storm, water washing blood from the trail. The lightning behind them revealed a figure watching from the ridge. Ruth Calder, coat whipping in the wind, her face unreadable. The rain didn't stop for 2 days. It came down in hard, slanted sheets that turned the roads into rivers and the fields into mirrored ghosts. The ranch looked smaller under that storm, roof leaking, windmill groaning, and the air thick with the smell of rust and clay. Mara stood at the window, watching water streak across the glass, her reflection split by lightning. Noah slept near the hearth, curled with the wooden horse in his hands. Each flash of light made the toy gleam like fire caught in motion. Mara turned as the door opened. Gideon stepped in, soaked to the bone, hair dripping under his hat brim. He said nothing, just dropped his coat on the peg and looked toward her. "You made it," she said. "Barely." He placed a folded packet on the table. "Deeds are filed. Judge signed off before Hartwell could bribe him." Chayton followed behind, limping slightly. "County clerk tried to hold us, but he wasn't faster than my horse." Mara smiled faintly. "You both look like men who outran God." "Maybe we did," Gideon said. He poured himself coffee, still standing. The lamplight caught the bruises along his jaw, the bandage on his arm. She moved closer. "You're hurt again." "Only on the outside." "You say that too often." He didn't answer. The fire popped. For a moment, the only sound was the rain tapping the windows like impatient fingers. Then he reached into his coat pocket and set something small on the table. A ring, tarnished but whole, its garnet stone dull under soot. Mara stared. "Where did you get that?" "Dug it up," Gideon said, "under the old apple tree. Guess I buried it long ago, same as everything else." She picked it up, turning it in her palm. The metal was cold. "Whose was it?" "My wife's," he said. "She died before the rains came back. I left the ring where her roots might find it." Mara looked up. "Why dig it now?" He shrugged. "Because I thought maybe promises ain't meant to rot." She felt something tighten in her throat. "And what do you want with it now?" "I want you to have it," he said simply. "I'm not good with words, Mara. Never was. But if you stay here, I'll learn how to speak them right." Her breath caught. The room felt smaller, warmer. "You don't have to ask." He stepped closer. "I'm not asking. I'm offering." Lightning flared outside, bright as gunfire. She looked at the ring, then at him. "Then ask me softer." He swallowed. "Mara, stay." She nodded once, a tear breaking loose in spite of her. "All right." He slipped the ring onto her hand. It didn't fit perfectly, but it didn't need to. Chayton cleared his throat, half smiling. "Never seen a proposal without music." Gideon shot him a look. "You got a drum?" "Just my heart," Chayton said. "It'll do." They laughed, a strange, brittle sound that felt like sunlight through storm clouds. Then, from outside, came a distant rumble, hooves through mud. The laughter died. Gideon's hand went to his gun. Mara moved to the window. "Riders." Chayton peered past her. 3, no, 4. Hartwell's colors." Gideon stepped outside into the rain, coat unbuttoned, revolver hanging loose in his hand. The riders slowed near the gate. One figure dismounted, coat soaked dark. Ruth Calder. She walked forward through the downpour, hat brim dripping. You're hard to find, March. Didn't hide. She stopped a few paces away. Hartwell's after both of us now. He found out I talked to the marshal. You signed his papers. I did, Ruth said. And then I burned the originals. She reached into her coat, pulling a soggy envelope. Proof. Hartwell forged the county seal. I kept one copy. Mara appeared behind Gideon. Why tell us? Because he sent Pike to kill me last night. Missed his mark, though. She pulled back her collar, showing a graze at her neck. He won't miss next time. Gideon studied her face. The badge on her chest was tarnished, almost black. You could have run. I'm done running, Ruth said. Thought maybe standing with someone who won't fold might buy me a clean conscience. Chayton stepped forward. You're late for that. Maybe, she said, but I'll stand anyway. Lightning split the sky, white and wild. For a heartbeat, the four of them looked like statues carved out of defiance. Then thunder rolled and the rain came harder, washing the blood and dirt from Ruth's coat. Inside, Noah woke crying. Mara rushed to him. Gideon holstered his gun, still watching Ruth. You bring more trouble with you? Trouble's already here, she said. Hartwell's calling men from the mine. 20, maybe 30. He means to wipe this place clean by sundown tomorrow. Gideon nodded slowly. Then we make it stand till dawn. He turned toward the barn, motion sharp and certain. We'll set barricades at the fence. Chayton, get the powder we hid in the root cellar. Mara, boil water. Ruth, clean your wound and find a gun you trust. Ruth managed a tired smile. You sound like you've done this before. I have, he said, and I lost good people then. Not this time. Mara returned, Noah clutching her hand. How bad will it be? Gideon glanced at the sky. Bad enough to matter. Ruth's voice dropped. Hartwell's men won't come for talk. They'll come for blood. Gideon looked at her. Then we'll give them something worth bleeding for. Outside, the rain began to ease, leaving the air still and heavy. Somewhere far off, a single red flare lit the clouds, Hartwell's signal to gather. The war for the valley would begin with the next sunrise. The night before the siege smelled of rain and gun oil. The storm had passed, but its ghost lingered. Low thunder on the horizon, flashes of heat lightning crawling across the clouds. Inside the barn, Gideon worked by lantern light, loading cartridges and checking the rifle bolts one last time. Each click echoed like a heartbeat. Ruth Calder sat on a hay bale, cleaning the cut at her neck. You ever get tired of wars that ain't yours? She asked. Gideon didn't look up. Every war starts as someone else's. Then it burns close enough, and it's yours. Chayton entered, carrying a sack of nails and 2 sticks of dynamite. They'll hit at first light, he said. Hartwell's got 20 men, maybe more. We don't need to outgun them, Gideon said. Just outlast them. Mara stepped in with a lantern, hair loose, face pale but steady. I boiled water and laid out bandages. Don't make me use them. Gideon allowed himself a faint smile. Can't promise that. Outside, the windmill creaked like an omen. Ruth tied her scarf tighter. He'll come himself, she said. Hartwell doesn't trust anyone to finish his work. Good, Gideon answered. I'd hate to miss the chance to look him in the eye. They worked through the night, nailing shutters, moving barrels, laying sandbags by the porch. Noah slept near the hearth, wrapped in blankets. When Mara passed, she paused to touch his hair, whispering a prayer too quiet for the others to hear. Just before dawn, Chayton climbed to the ridge and lit a signal fire. Smoke will draw them early, he said. Better they come before we tire. The first light broke over the horizon, bleeding red through the clouds. A distant shout carried on the wind. Then hooves, many, fast, relentless. Mara gripped her shotgun. It's time! Gideon took position by the porch. Let them cross the line first. The riders appeared through the dust. Hartwell at their front in a long black coat, Harlan Pike beside him, arm in a sling but eyes full of hate. Ruth raised her rifle. Rate medium. He brought the devil and his echo. Hartwell reined in near the fence. March. You've trespassed on company ground. Turn over the deeds and the woman, and maybe I'll leave you breathing. Gideon stepped out into the open. You've already taken enough, Hartwell. Time you learned what the land does to thieves. Hartwell laughed. This land doesn't care who owns it. It only remembers who bleeds for it. Then it remembers me, Gideon said. He raised his rifle. The first shot cracked, sharp as lightning. Hartwell's hat flew off, grazing his temple. The riders charged. Gunfire erupted, echoing chaos. Mara fired from the porch, hitting a man square in the chest. Chayton's shots came from the ridge, precise and measured. Ruth moved beside Gideon, her badge glinting dull in the smoke. Hartwell's men reached the corral. One tossed a torch onto the hay. Flames leapt up, spreading fast. Mara ran for the water trough, dousing the boards. Smoke curled around her like a shroud. Stay down, Gideon shouted. I'm not built for staying down, she answered, firing again. Bullets punched through the barn wall. Ruth ducked behind a post. We'll run out of rounds before they run out of greed, Chayton shouted from the ridge. Not if I cut their water. He sprinted to the diversion ditch, opening the floodgate. Water roared down the hill, turning the ground to mud. Horses screamed, stumbling. The charge faltered. Hartwell saw it and cursed. Burn it all, he yelled. Harlan Pike dismounted, lighting another fuse. Ruth spotted him. He's going to blow the house. Gideon leapt from the porch, sliding through the mud. The fuse hissed. He grabbed it barehanded, tearing it free just as Harlan swung his revolver. You should have stayed a soldier, Harlan said. Never was good at taking orders. The two men clashed, rolling in the muck. The revolver went off once, deafening. Then Gideon's fist found Harlan's jaw, sending him reeling. The outlaw grabbed a knife, slashing upward. Gideon caught his wrist, twisted hard. The blade fell. He drove his elbow into Harlan's chest, pinning him. Tell your boss the valley says no. He slammed the man's head into the mud. Harlan went still. Ruth fired another shot, dropping a rider who aimed for Mara. That's 5 down, she muttered. Chayton's voice echoed from above. They're pulling back! Indeed, Hartwell's remaining men retreated toward the ridge, their torches snuffed by mud and fear. The land itself had turned against them. Hartwell alone stayed mounted, glaring at Gideon through the smoke. "You think this ends because I ride off?" he snarled. Gideon wiped rain and blood from his face. "It ends when you stop lying to yourself." Hartwell raised his pistol. A single shot cracked. But Ruth stepped in front of Gideon, the bullet grazing her shoulder instead. She fired back, hitting Hartwell's gun hand. The pistol dropped. "You don't get to hide behind the law anymore," she said. Hartwell's horse reared, throwing him into the mud. He crawled up, face pale, clutching his bleeding hand. "Arrest him," Gideon said. Ruth nodded, pressing her badge into Hartwell's chest. "For fraud, theft, and stupidity," he spat. "You'll hang for this." "Maybe," she said, "but not today." The rain began again, thin but steady, washing blood from the steps. Mara knelt beside Gideon, checking the gash on his arm. "You did it," she whispered. He looked around, the barn still smoking, the fields drenched, the windmill turning again, slow and sure. "We bought time. That's all any of us ever do." Chayton rode down from the ridge, eyes grim. "We should bury the dead before the sun's high." Ruth glanced toward the horizon. "And Hartwell?" Gideon stood, voice calm but final. "Let the judge decide, for once." But when he turned, Noah stood in the doorway, holding a folded paper, the soaked envelope Ruth had brought earlier. "Ma," he said softly, "this says my name." Mara's face went still. Gideon took the paper, unfolded it. The ink was faint but legible. Certificate of birth. Father, unknown. The silence that followed cut deeper than gunfire. The dawn after the siege broke strange and quiet. Smoke hung low over the valley, blurring the horizon to the color of old brass. The air smelled of gunpowder, wet earth, and something almost sweet. The way the land breathes after blood has fed it. Gideon March stood on the porch, rifle across his knees, watching the mist burn away. Behind him, the door creaked open. Mara stepped out, hair undone, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "Noah's still sleeping," she said. "He didn't even stir when the thunder started again." "That wasn't thunder," Gideon said. "Chayton's firing a signal." She frowned. "For what?" "To warn that Hartwell's not finished." Before she could answer, Chayton rode in fast from the ridge, his horse coated in mud. "He's regrouped by the canyon," he said. "Not as many men, but enough to try again." Ruth followed him out of the barn, arm still bandaged, her badge pinned crookedly to her shirt. "He won't go quietly. I sent word to the marshal, but we'll be on our own till they get here." Gideon nodded, jaw tightening. "Then we make our stand before he does." They moved quickly, Chayton cutting irrigation ditches to divert the floodgate, Ruth loading rifles, Mara boiling water and laying out torn sheets. Every corner of the ranch felt alive, trembling between fear and resolve. Even the windmill moaned, turning slow like it knew what was coming. By mid-morning, Hartwell's men appeared again, riding through the low fog. They came slower this time, faces grim, torches unlit. Harlan Pike rode at their head, arm bound tight, eyes burning hate. Behind them came Hartwell in a black carriage, his coat immaculate despite the mud. Gideon watched through the scope of his rifle. "He's bringing the fight to the door," he murmured. Mara joined him, shotgun in hand. "Then we'll open it." Hartwell reined his horse at the fence. "You can't stop progress, March," he called. "This land was bought and paid for. You're squatting on the future." Gideon stood, stepping onto the porch. "Then the future's trespassing." A single shot cracked from Hartwell's side. Warning or challenge. The war began again. Chayton opened the floodgates. A roar of water surged down the hill, tearing through the mud. Hartwell's riders shouted, horses floundering in the sudden torrent. Gideon fired once, hitting a torch before it could ignite the barn. Ruth picked off another, her aim clean despite her wound. Mara ran through the smoke, reloading, shouting above the noise. "They're coming around the back!" Gideon turned just as Harlan Pike appeared by the bridge, revolver raised. Their eyes met across the chaos, one born of greed, one of resolve. "This ends now," Harlan shouted. "Agreed," Gideon said. They fired at the same instant. Harlan's shot tore Gideon's hat from his head. Gideon's bullet struck the outlaw square in the chest. Harlan staggered backward onto the collapsing bridge. The boards gave way, and he plunged into the flood below. Mara froze, breathing hard. "Is he gone?" Gideon said. Hartwell saw it happen. His face twisted, rage breaking through polish. "Burn it all!" he screamed. "No survivors!" But his men hesitated. The flood too strong, their fear heavier than his gold. When Ruth rode forward, badge raised high, her voice cut through the smoke. "Stand down. By order of the territory marshal, this ranch and its people are under protection." Some lowered their guns. Others fled. Hartwell turned his horse, but Ruth fired once, hitting the ground at his feet. "Don't run, Victor. I want the papers back." He laughed bitterly. "You think this valley will thank you for saving it? They'll pave it over and call it mercy." "Maybe," Ruth said, "but they'll know your name first." Maeve Elkins arrived then, leading half the town with her. Farmers, store hands, even the preacher. They carried torches not for burning, but for light. "You're done, Hartwell," Maeve said. "We're witnesses." Hartwell dismounted slowly, fury giving way to fatigue. "You all think you've won," he muttered. "But the mines don't care who owns the dust." Gideon approached, mud-streaked and breathing hard. "Then go dig somewhere else." Ruth stepped forward, snapping cuffs on his wrists. "By the law you bought, I arrest you for fraud, arson, and attempted murder." Hartwell sneered. "You'll hang for this." "Then I'll swing straight," Ruth said. The marshal's flag fluttered weakly from her saddle. The valley went still except for the hiss of water draining back into the fields. As the last echoes of gunfire died, Noah ran from the house and clung to Mara's leg. She dropped her gun, crouching to hold him close. Gideon watched them, chest rising with something between relief and disbelief. Ruth turned to him. "It's over." He shook his head. "Not yet." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He looked toward the porch, where Noah's papers still lay on the table. their edges curling from damp. The boy's record. Hartwell forged more than deeds. He might have forged a life. Mara looked at him sharply. "What are you saying?" He lifted the birth certificate, pointing to a faint signature beneath the word unknown. It was barely legible, but there all the same. V. Hartwell. Ruth exhaled. God help us. The truth landed heavy. The child she had carried through dust and hunger bore the name of the man who'd nearly killed them all. Mara went pale. "No, he's mine. Only mine." Gideon stepped closer. "That paper don't change who raised him." "But it changes everything," she whispered. The fire in the barn hissed out in the rain. Above them, the sky cracked open with lightning again. Brief, blinding, final. The trial came fast, carried by rumor faster than the law. A week after the fire, wagons from Santa Vega rolled into the valley, kicking dust over the charred remains of Hartwell's camp. The mountains still smelled faintly of smoke, but the creek ran clear again, whispering over stone like it was washing the memory clean. Gideon March stood before the county judge under the open sky, hat in hand, boots sunk in honest dirt. Ruth Calder testified first, voice firm despite the sling on her arm. Victor Hartwell falsified deeds, forged county seals, and diverted public water into private mines, she said. When we resisted, he ordered his men to destroy the evidence and kill witnesses. Hartwell sat shackled beside the bailiff, his face hollow, eyes flicking between Gideon and Mara. "You think this changes anything?" he sneered. "Another man will come, another mine. The valley bleeds silver." Gideon met his stare. "Then we'll keep bandaging it." The crowd murmured approval. The judge banged his gavel once. "Enough! The evidence is clear. All claims by Hartwell Mining Company are void. Ranch March is legally recognized as private property under territorial law." A ripple of applause moved through the gathered crowd. Maeve Elkins dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. "Told you the land keeps score," she whispered. Ruth stepped forward, removing her badge and placing it on the table before the judge. "I'll answer for my part. I served the wrong side too long." The judge nodded. "Your cooperation saved lives. The territory accepts your resignation, not your guilt." Outside, the wind carried the smell of rain and cut hay. Chayton Two Feathers approached Gideon, offering a small clay jug. "Water from the spring," he said, "runs clean again. The spirits accepted your fight." Gideon took it, uncorked the jug, and poured a few drops onto the ground. "Then may it stay that way." They walked back to the ranch that afternoon under a pale sun. The fields shimmered gold with the first shoots of wild barley breaking through. Mara rode beside him. Noah perched between them, the wooden horse tucked under his arm. She said quietly, "Medium." "The judge called you a landowner. I've been called worse." "You don't sound proud." He looked over the hills where the apple tree stood alone. "Land's just dirt unless someone believes in it. Same with people." When they reached the porch, Ruth dismounted, untied a folded letter, and handed it to him. "Marshal's orders," she said. "They want you to testify in Santa Vega if Hartwell appeals. You'll get paid." "Keep the money," Gideon said. "Use it to fix what the law broke." Ruth smiled faintly. "You're stubborn as sin, March." "I've been called worse," he repeated. She tipped her hat. "Take care of this land. It's got your temper." Then she rode off, hoofbeats fading until only wind and birds remained. Mara helped Noah down, leading him to the old apple tree. Beneath it, the soil was soft from rain. She knelt, pulling weeds from the roots. "It'll bloom again," she said. "Like us?" Noah asked. She smiled. "Exactly like us." Gideon joined them, leaning on his rifle, silent for a long time. Then he spoke low, steady. "There's something I should ask." Mara stood, brushing dirt from her hands. "Ask, then." He set the rifle aside. "You can stay here, with your own name on the door, or you can leave, start somewhere else. Either way, I'll keep the land safe for you and the boy." She studied him, face marked by wind and loss, eyes steady but uncertain. "You think I want to leave?" "I think you could." She shook her head. "I've been running my whole life. I'm done with that." Gideon's throat tightened. "Then what do you want?" She took a step closer. "A home. Not one I borrow, one I build." He nodded slowly. "Then build it. Here. With me." Mara reached into her pocket, pulling out the tarnished ring with the garnet stone. She slipped it off her finger, wiped it clean against her skirt, and placed it in his hand. "Ask again, proper this time." Gideon's voice was barely above a whisper. "Mara Lark, will you be my wife?" She smiled. "I already am." He slid the ring back onto her finger. It still didn't fit right, but neither of them cared. Noah laughed, running circles around them with the wooden horse held high. The sky above them flared with light, the first true dawn the valley had seen in months. The windmill turned smooth again, creaking like an old friend. The creek shimmered below, silver without greed. Mara rested her head on Gideon's shoulder. "Do you think peace lasts?" He looked toward the horizon. "Long enough if we guard it." Chaitin's voice carried from the distance. "The land remembers those who listen." As the sun rose higher, its light reached every scar the fire had left. Fence posts, burnt timbers, graves of men and mistakes. Each one caught the morning and glowed. On that porch, with dust on their boots and love stitched out of survival, Gideon March finally stopped looking for battle. He had already won what mattered. And from the hills, the echo of water answered like a hymn reborn. As the sun sets over the valley and the windmill turns slow and steady once more, we're reminded that every heart, no matter how weathered, still deserves a home. Gideon and Mara's story isn't just about the Wild West. It's about second chances, quiet courage, and finding peace when the storms finally pass. If this tale of faith, land, and love touched you, we'd be honored to hear your thoughts. Tell us what moment stayed with you most. Was it Mara's strength, Gideon's quiet loyalty, or the way the land itself seemed to forgive? Your comments and memories keep these stories alive, and we love hearing from folks who've seen a few seasons and still believe in hope. If you'd like more Western stories like this, filled with grit, grace, and a touch of redemption, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who could use a little warmth tonight. Until the next tale rides in, keep your coffee hot, your boots steady, and your heart open to the quiet kind of love that never grows old.